welcome tonight to our canning series part 2. Our first part was on pressure canning, and tonight is on, it's a twofer tonight actually. It is on best practices for canning, and we are doing jams and jellies and marmalades, and we're gonna do some live canning tonight. My water bath canner is on its way to a boil, and that part takes forever. So we pre-started that, and the strawberries are chopped and ready to make a strawberry lemonade marmalade. Kind of sounds like a good song, huh? So I am Mary Beth Lima. I am the Family and Consumer Sciences Extension Agent with UC Extension here in Blount County. And we have Linda Hyder, who is also an FCS agent, and she's in Sevier County. So tonight we are the two experts on food preservation, and we like to say that we are the providers of information who are giving out all of this information, but our true experts and gurus are there at the University of Tennessee. And so if we don't know the answer, we definitely have people, Dr. Bernie is one of them, who can give us some great answers. And so tonight, if we have some questions we're not sure of, we can always contact her. And she is so wonderful. She's always available via text messages, or I can call her too. So she's on standby just in case. Linda, I'm going to ask if you could go ahead and go over some housekeeping, such as the chat box. I have received an email from our Kathleen from Blount County, who's trying to get contact in here and having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to get with her if you want to take over for a brief moment.
Sure. Well, as she said, I am Linda Hyder, and I thought Mary Beth was going to call us the Can Girls. So that's what we'll be tonight, the Can Girls. And for the next few months, we really enjoy doing this together. As far as the house rules, we will have time for questions, but we ask that you put those in the chat box. Sometimes, we get interrupted and it's hard to get back to where we're going. So we're going to take some breaks, and I'll just go over the questions in the chat box and read them from that. So just to make sure everyone can use the chat box, I think we've had 5 people respond. Can everybody just tell me, let's see, what's your favorite jam? Can you type that in the chat box? And if someone's having difficulty with that, I guess let us know, or you'll be able to, there is a time where if you can't use the chat, we'll let you ask the question. So I don't know, hopefully everyone's pretty familiar with Zoom. There is a little microphone to the bottom left of your screen that says mute or unmute. And we're gonna ask that you unmute yourself, that you put an arrow over that. When you click on it, you'll see a red diagonal line that goes over it, and just have your sound off while we're making our presentation. And at question time, you can hit that again, and you'll be able to speak through your microphone.
I think we've got blackberry, raspberry, grape, strawberry, delicious. Cherry.
That sounds good. Also, please silence your cell phones, but you're adults. If you have an important call, you got to get up and go, then go. That's for sure. So, but anyway, we look forward. We're pretty good about ending on time. We really work hard for that. So this should be over at 7:30. And like she said, if there's questions we can't answer, we may send you an email with the answer tomorrow or something, and get your information that you need.
All right, let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get right in to the most important topic. It may not be the most thrilling topic, but it is the most important, and that is our canning. So give me a moment if I share my screen.
Yes, I'm at 8:30. I'm sorry, did I say 7:30? Yeah.
I know. We would.
Thank you for listening so well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you see a slide that says 10 best practices. I want to be able to see all of you. I'm changing my view. There we go. Good job. Okay, great. So we're going to go over the 10 best practices for home preserved foods. Now, if any of you were on a couple of weeks ago, or I'm sorry, last year, you may have already received this this slideshow, but we want to make sure that everybody gets this, and we're going to go ahead and have it recorded and uploaded to the YouTube site. So it's always good to hear a second time as well. Again, this is only the first part of our program tonight, so let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, we do have to understand that canning is fun. Canning can be fun. Canning is an art. There's definitely an art, and I highly recommend to any of you when we have our Blue Ribbon Country Fair, or Linda Hatter has her county fair, Sevier County Fair, or the East Tennessee Valley Fair, you can enter your products into the fair, and we judge. It's judged, and you could be up for a blue ribbon. So definitely, it's an art, and if you've never done it before and you want to see what it's like when the fairs do open, and I think they are this year, go ahead and take a peek at that section, and you can kind of see what other people are doing, and it's just a beautiful art. As far as cost savings, you know, there is some cost savings to it eventually, but upfront costs can be fairly expensive. Getting all the right equipment, getting in your jars, investing in your jars. And then where you would save money is if you have a very fruitful garden yourself. So other than that, if you are just starting canning, it isn't necessarily a cost saving piece. Another reason why people can is because you know what's in it. You know what is in your product. And that is what is very, very popular right now in particular. And canning has become, during this time of our pandemic, extremely popular. I think because there's a safety aspect to it, and being able to put up your own fruits, your own vegetables and meat, and have that safe for you is important. We'll touch on a little bit more of that, and we probably will have some questions about the most popular question is where to find lists. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but those are reasons why people can, because it's fun, it's an art, you know what's in your product, and eventually it can be a cost saving process. However, there can be blood, sweat, and tears. It is not easy. Now I'm going to make it look easy tonight, but that's because I've done some prepping ahead of time. But it is not an easy process, and it is a long process. And so sometimes when I go over best practices, I kind of burst some people's bubbles, and I kind of feel like I've become the food preservation police. But the most important piece to all of this is making sure that you are keeping yourself and your family and those who you're giving your products to safe. So the first step in canning and making sure that you are safe is making sure that you have fresh produce. So whatever you choose to can, you should can within 12 hours of picking that product, because you want the safest without spoilage fruit or vegetable. And you'll definitely want to make sure that you are inspecting for physical damage, and because we want to use the best product in our canned good. We want to keep away from anything that's undesirable, any kind of, we want to wash it really, really good to make sure that there's no chemicals in it. And if there are undesirable microorganisms, there could become a chemical change in the canned goods as well. So we want to remove any of our bruises. Now, some of you may get a tomato, and I know I've done this, where it's a little bruised on one side. So you just cut it out and eat the rest. So microorganisms have long finger-like pieces to their bacteria, and they are invisible. And so although we see a small piece on our tomato, the entire tomato could be infected. And so when you go to can, you may end up with a damaged piece over time. It doesn't necessarily mean that eating that tomato fresh right then and there is going to harm you, but over time it could. So we definitely want to be careful. We want to make sure that we don't get any spoilage, and we use the best top quality fruits and vegetables. So what is the concern? Well, there are some amazing microorganisms in our environment. We have yeast that's there, and we use that in our cooking, right? We use that to raise as a leavening agent to raise our bread. We use it in a lot of beneficial areas to cooking. We also use mold. We have mold that is, delicious to eat, such as blue cheese, that can be potentially healthy. We also have healthy bacteria. We have bacteria in our gut that help us to grow and be healthy. So there are microorganisms that are healthy for us and good, but there are others that are very, very dangerous. And that the biggest one when it comes to canning is Clostridium botulinum. And that is the gas that is produced. You may have know it from, or the gas is botulism. The problem with that is, do y'all remember your, if any of your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents canned, you would get the jam, the jar of jam. You may even have the paraffin wax on it. You pull it off. It may be molded on top a little bit. You just scoop it off, throw it away, and then eat the rest. Okay, so that you can see, right? It's not a best practice, so we don't want to do that. We don't encourage you to do that, but you can see that mold. You can smell that mold. If you open up a can, it may not be, you may not have it completely sealed. You can see bubbles. Those, of course, you would want to discard. But the problem with Clostridium botulinum is there is no visual aspect to this bacteria. You cannot see it, you cannot smell it, you cannot taste it, and that's serious. And so this is not meant to scare you. It's only meant to tell you it can be very serious, and we need to make sure we are following best practices. So what we're going to get into is, how do we prevent this? I'll tell you how serious it is. The poor Gerber family. The Gerber family was having a family gathering, and unfortunately 12 people in her family passed because of botulism in her famous green bean salad she was using. And she didn't use proper best practices, and we need to make sure we boil our green beans, and unfortunately they died. So we have to be very careful. There's just as much chance in commercial foods as well. That's why commercial foods are held to a higher standard as well, to keep us and prevent us from these. But it's so important. And some people say, well, that was 100 years ago. Well, just 2 years ago, there was a family in Ohio where 2 people died from botulism, and so from improperly home canned food. So again, it's very, very important that we follow guidelines. So this is a spore-forming bacteria, and they can survive under extreme stresses, which is why we have to make sure that we process our food. So when I use the term processing tonight, it means the process of submerging a jar into hot water bath, a hot water bath, or if you're pressure canning, to place that jar into the pressure canner and cook it for a certain amount of time. And so the processing is the most important part in keeping our food safe. And that is ensuring that the air is taken out of the jar and that the inside of the jar is heated to the correct temperature. I can't remember if this is in our slide or not, so I'm going to mention it now, and if I see it, we can skip over it. But what are some things that we can do to prevent? And that is, there is some good news in that a lot of this botulism is found in low acid foods, such as your green beans, your corn. That is where there's more of an increase. If you have a high acid condition or you've got a high sugar condition, the chances of it are reduced. And so you'll see in our processing times, they are less. It's why pressure canning takes such a longer time. And so that's something to think about. You're doing high acid, high sugar, such as pickles, tomatoes, or your jams and jellies, the chances are a little more slim. You still can potentially get it, but because it's such a high acid, high sugar environment, it's not as likely. So our goal is to preserve quality, high quality food safely. So the very first thing we want to do is to use up-to-date methods and tested recipes. So remember I said that we need to make sure that the inside of that product is heated to the correct temperature. So one of the testing kitchens for recipes is, of course, Ball and also the University of Georgia. So they will receive a recipe and test it, and they'll use a jar that has a temperature inside. And what they'll do is put it under different pressures and different canning methods to make sure that the inside of the temperature gets heated to the correct temperature at the right amount of time. So what's important in that product is the amount of product, the type of product, the thickness of the product. A perfect example of that is cinnamon. Cinnamon can be very thick, and it's very hard to get the inside of that product heated to the correct temperature. So sometimes we have to cook it a little bit longer. There are other pieces in our slideshow that will show that we can't get to the right temperature. It's too thick, such as pumpkin. That's one of the ones that we can't, or corn on the cob. So we need to make sure that the temperature is at the correct time in that jar to decrease our chances of bacteria forming. And so we have to use tested recipes. But then the biggest question, and I'm sorry, but that's the Debbie Downer part of this, because when people get into canning, what do they want to do? They want to preserve their grandmother's recipe or their great grandfather's recipe. I had one person who had been canning tomato sauce, their family, for 100 years. But unfortunately, and they'll say, of course, people will always say, well, I never got sick, or my family never got sick, but it just takes one jar. And so we do have to use tested recipes. But even though that's a little sad that we can't use great aunt so-and-so's recipe, or we can't just go on YouTube and go, oh, here's a recipe that's great to use. We have to use tested. The good news is there are thousands of recipes. And what I have found while I've been canning and while I've been teaching these classes is there is a very high probability that the recipe that you want to cook is close enough available as a tested recipe. And so I recommend going and finding a similar recipe and trying that out. Another thing is, if you want to do, let's say, the Italian spaghetti sauce, you know, maybe you can't find great aunt so-and-so's Italian sauce that you want to make, but what you can do, or you can is the fresh tomatoes. Or there's a great starter sauce that just uses a little bit of basil, garlic, and onion. And that's what I do in my house. We're Italian and we do a lot of tomato sauce. And so I do a basic starter. And that's the sauce that I use. And I make the traditional family sauce from scratch and fresh, and then we eat it then. So you can still can parts of the recipes that are from your family. You just can't can the recipe if it's not tested. So these are some great resources. So Easy to Preserve is what we call sometimes the Bible of canning. It has everything you can imagine how to can wild game. I know that has actually been very popular lately. Again, with our pandemic, people are wanting to find alternative food resources. And they even have canned squirrel in that. Also, the National Center for Food Preservation, the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning. And then UT has a canning book. And I always, in my county, provide that to anybody who comes in and gets their pressure canner lid tested. So that you can, call my office or Linda's office, and we can see about getting that to you. Or if you sign up for an in-person class one day when we have in-person classes again, you can get that. So again, another place that you can go, and let me check if it's on this slide. There's a few more. Another place that you can get information is through Ball or freshpreserving.com. That's another excellent source. In fact, I am going to stop sharing and show you that site, because I'm going to answer one of the biggest questions that everyone always asks. Tonight, I am making a strawberry lemonade marmalade that calls for 6 cups of sugar. Woo! 6 cups. So everybody always asks about no sugar jam, and they are available. This one's from freshpreserving.com. I really like this site because it's got tons of recipes that you can look into. And here's one that doesn't use any sugar. It uses 4 cups of strawberries and 2/3 cup of unsweetened fruit juice. And it's difficult to find unsweetened fruit juice if you're looking for it to say unsweetened fruit juice. Any fruit juice that says 100% fruit juice is going to be unsweetened. So you can use the grape juice, the pear juice, any kind of fruit juice that you'd like. So that's freshpreserving.com, and that is your Ball website, Ball and Kerr website that you can use. All right, let me get back to my PowerPoint. Linda, would you like to address any of the questions?
Okay. I don't have any at this point.
Oh, okay.
The chat box. I will say at that Fresh Preserving site, I ask you your favorite jams or jellies. Nobody put the caramel apple coffee jam. That is on Fresh Preserving. There is all kinds of new exciting recipes. Caramel apple coffee jam. Can you imagine?
Sounds delicious. Give me just a moment. Give me a thumbs up if you see the PowerPoint. Okay. Let me just, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties in that I lost my cursor on my screen. So give me just a moment. It goes slow, it usually pops up.
I will talk while you do that. I do encourage to check out that site. Like I said, there's a lot of neat recipes. It is research based. There's also, we'll talk about pectin in a few minutes, but there's a pectin calculator where you can actually go to Fresh Preserving. And if you want to just do 4 jars of jam, it'll allow you to do that. So you can, I can't imagine just doing 1 can, but it has 1 can even. It tells you how much fruit and pectin and all to put in for 1 can. So a lot of neat things on that site. You can just search jam recipes.
Okay, I got it working again. So again, Linda, can you give me a thumbs up? Do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, so again, use tested recipes, and there are so many available. Any extension will have recipes, so easy to preserve. And be careful when you're purchasing So Easy to Preserve. because of the pandemic, and we've had such, I mean, I'm just guessing, do not quote me, but it's been like, it feels like a 400% increase in canning. It has been unbelievable in the increase of canning. And we have to be really careful of a couple of things. Number one is so easy to preserve through the University of Georgia. You can order through the University of Georgia, and it has about a $25 charge to it. Now they may be on back order right now, but be careful in ordering it on Amazon and other companies because my son in the background, if you can see him, he's going to be our tech guy. So he's asking me questions about getting us ready for jams and jellies. Sorry about the distraction. But anyway, some companies are selling it for $85. One person sold for $125. So just be careful, be careful. And while I'm talking about this, be careful with lids as well. And we're going to get into that too, but lids should only be a couple of dollars. So we already talked about making sure that we choose quality food and safe food. So we can't just cut away the bad parts. I mean, you're welcome to do that and have a fresh salad right away, but not when it comes to food preservation. We already talked about 6 to 12 hours between harvest time. We want to make sure. So there is some fruit that may need to ripen 1 or 2 days between harvest and canning, but there are also some fruits that you need to can unripened, such as a mango. And I experimented with that. Mangoes, you need, because of the high sugar, you need to be sure to use unripened. Because the boiling process in the sugar juice starts to ripen the mango, if you want a nice crunchy mango, you've got to choose unripened and it will sweeten itself. But if you choose a ripened mango, because it's already ripened, it won't withstand the high heat and it'll just be mush. So definitely read your recipe and it will tell you how to keep it and whether it needs to be ripened or not. We want to make sure that we begin with a clean produce. We want to make sure we're washing, anything that you have to peel. We just want to make sure that we're getting all the bacteria off. Some foods have been pre-treated. And so we want to make sure that we are doing things as quickly as possible. And one of the biggest things is when we're cutting our apples and whatnot, it takes some time to cook. And we want to make sure that that enzymatic browning doesn't happen. And so you can pre-treat the food with ascorbic acid. They recommend 1 level teaspoon of pure powder ascorbic acid. You can usually find it in your canning seasoning supermarket section. It's about 3 grams. You can use 1 teaspoon per gallon of water, and you can soak the apples in there to prevent that. Ascorbic acid from vitamin C tablets are economical and available year-round in stores. You can buy 50 milligram tablets, crush them, and dissolve 6 tablespoons per gallon. And you can use that as well. So that's a pre-treatment that you can use to prevent that enzymatic browning.
A brand name for that is Fruit Fresh. You can use the powder, Fruit Fresh.
So another is blanching. So again, you just want to follow your directions, and we like to blanch because it brings out that bright color, but still contains the texture and the nutrients that are inside those vegetables. So definitely follow your recipe when it comes to blanching. Okay, so when it comes to adding acid, so why would we add acid to a food? Number one is we may be doing pickles. We may be pickling, and of course that brings on a delicious flavor. Another time it may be a tomato. But the most important is when we choose a acid to use, it has to be store bought. Now this just breaks my heart because when it comes to home canning, you want to use the most fresh materials possible, right? You don't want to use store bought lemon juice, but unfortunately, we cannot guarantee a lemon has 5% acidity. So we have to use store bought to ensure it's 5%. So you want to make sure your lemon juice, your vinegar, whatever it is that you're choosing as your acid is 5%. And if you purchase store bought, then you know it's at 5%. And some people said, well, how can I have fun with pickling or, with my salsa if I have to add the vinegar? You can choose lemon juice or vinegar when it asks for an acid, or you can use citric acid, but you can change out your vinegars. You can use, red wine vinegar. You can use apple cider vinegar. You can change those vinegars out or lemon juice and have a little bit of fun and creativity with that. This is just an excellent picture to show your high acid versus low acid foods and what you need to pressure can versus water bath can. We are going to be water bath canning for the next 3 parts to our series. We're doing the jams tonight, pickling next month, and then we'll follow up with tomatoes. And that's all water bath canning. There's 2 different types of packing. You've got hot pack and you've got cold pack. A cold pack would be cutting your cucumbers and putting them into your warm jar, then pouring your brine on top. A benefit of doing that is you really can get your hands in there and really pack that into your jar. The downside is your food will shrink a little bit and there'll be some shrinkage. And then you think you packed your jar really hard and then it turns out you didn't. A hot pack is where you cook your product in a pot. We're doing a hot pack tonight with the jams and jellies, and you cook the product ahead of time and then pour the entire product into the jar. So that is a hot pack. As you're looking at recipes, it may say hot pack or cold pack, and you can decide and experiment which one that you want to use. So here's some pieces that we'll be talking about tonight when I am canning. And the first is using 2-piece lids and mason jars. We want to be careful with getting garage sale jars. You can if you want, but you have to be careful. Number 1 is it has to say mason, curve, or ball on it. You have to inspect for nicks, cracks, and we have to be very careful with those. So it's not necessarily recommended to get them from garage sales because of those nicks and cracks. And we have to be very, very careful. You can reuse jars. You can reuse rings as long as there's no rust, but you have to use 2 pieces, which I'll show you tonight when we're actually cooking, and 2-piece lids, and you have to replace the lid. Lids will typically last up to 1 year, although Ball has recently come out with a lid that will last up to 18 months. So headspace. Headspace is the piece between the product and the top of the jar or up to the lid. We want to make sure that we have a correct amount of headspace, and depending on what the product is, depends on how much headspace we're going to use. Too little can interfere with the seal. Too much can make the air drive out of the jar, and I have seen that happen with the green beans. So we have to make sure it has the perfect amount of headspace, and we can use that by using a little magic wand that you can get at your local grocery store. I'll show you how to use that tonight. And we want to make sure we read our recipe correctly, and it will tell us how much headspace we need. So let's talk about jars. People have been using these types of jars for years. In fact, you may remember in your grandparents' house that they did use these jars. Unfortunately, these are great to look at, but they are not good to use. We need 2-piece lids. So standard containers are half pint, pint, and quart. We want to make sure that it is the standard clear and in good condition. We want to be careful of commercialized jars. I've seen people can in reusable mayonnaise jars, peanut butter, tomato sauce jars. Unfortunately, it has to say Ball, Kerr, or Mason on it to use. And again, we have to use the 2-piece lid. So there's some fancy jars out there. You know, companies are always trying to find the latest and greatest gadget to sell that is a must-have in the kitchen. And right now, currently, there is a 12-ounce jar. This is a non-standard jar. And unfortunately, there are no tested recipes for a 12-ounce jar. So we can use a half pint, a pint, or a quart jar. There are half-gallon jars. Those are recommended for your juices, but we don't always recommend them. It's also hard in a half-gallon jar to really fit into a water bath can. So we want to kind of stay away from those. So these are examples. The middle one is called a steamer, and then we have the water bath canner, which I'm using tonight, and this is a pressure canner. The steamer you can use, but the problem with the steamer is that you cannot see your product. And it's the same with this type of canner as well. This is a weighted gauge pressure canner. We prefer the dial gauge so you can actually see the pressure visually. And we also prefer where you can actually see what's going on with the canner, like the water bath canner. It's also one of the problems with those multi-cookers as well. Again, you can use them, it's okay. However, as far as USDA is concerned, it may not be safe because you cannot see the product of what's going on, and you cannot guarantee that it's reaching the temperature that it needs to reach. All right, I'm going fairly quickly here. So moving right along. Back in the day, they used to use an open kettle canning method, but unfortunately, again, it is not recommended. Dial gauge pressure canner or a water bath canner are the processing gadgets that are recommended. So I have seen this. I have seen this on some YouTube videos. What is the easiest and best way to can your jams and jellies? Stick them upside down in your dishwasher. It is not recommended. There are no safe ways of doing this. I've seen another one on Facebook, and people doing in East Tennessee on Facebook, people canning their jams and jellies, but not processing them. They just flip them upside down and say, all done. We have to be very careful with that. It still has to be processed. That means submerged in a water bath canner or used in a pressure canner.
And also dry canning. We've seen that. That's not recommended.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's how we cook our food. But what about storage? Well, remember how I said that lids are only available for 1 year? They really are, the quality of it is only good for 1 year. So when you are cooking, your goods really need to be used within 1 year. So only cook something that's within 1 year. So you don't want to cook so much that you won't use it. Now, this is a shocker to many people because people have been eating things for several years old. It doesn't necessarily mean that the product is going to go rancid. I mean, there is a chance, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. But what is happening is that product is going to start to deteriorate, and the quality of the product will start to lessen. So what they say is eat everything up front, you know, only make as much as you can eat for a family within a year. And then as you cook new things, you want to push the older jars forward and put the newer products in the back. We want to store between 50 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit in a dark, cool location. And actually, we are supposed to store them without the rings. That gives us a better view of what's going on in the product. So when you go to store them, this is stored improperly in this picture. It's why I chose the picture, because really you should be taking the rings off. The purpose of the rings is to hold the lid on in place while you are processing it. It does not help with keeping the lid on for a longer period of time or The only purpose is to keep it in place. And I am talking, and I just want to really quick check on my boiling water. Let me go peek over there real quick.
One thing I wanted to mention to our presentation, if you have some jars that were maybe a little older, like last year, go ahead and boil those for 10 minutes, the contents. Like if it's green beans, I would suggest boiling it for 10 minutes before you actually serve it. That's just kind of a little extra safeguard. You're on mute, Mary Beth.
There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. These are just a review. And then a couple more things that I want to talk about is corn on the cob. So there is no process yet for corn on the cob, and the same is for mashed or pureed pumpkin or winter squash. It's just too thick. We cannot get a proper temperature in the center of it. During the harvest time in the fall, we saw a lot of people, particularly on YouTube, that were producing pureed pumpkin. And unfortunately, there just is not a good recipe. So what is recommended instead, as your harvests come in, is cut them into 1-inch cubes, and then you can freeze them. So are tomatoes a low acid food? So this is a question for you all, and I'm going to now quiz you. So if you want to unmute yourself, and while you're doing that, I am going to make sure that my son is ready for our live canning piece. So go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'm going to ask you some questions to see how much you can remember. Okay, so the first question is, are tomatoes a low acid food? Just shout out the answer if you know it.
They're high acid.
They are high acid, however, we cannot guarantee that they are at 5% acidity. And so because of that, we have to add acid to our tomatoes when we cook them, but we can pressure can them or water bath can them. If we water bath, we just have to make sure we add that acid. I can my tomatoes all the time. I do crushed tomatoes, and you never can tell the taste of the vinegar. Usually a tablespoon of vinegar per jar, and your recipe will tell you. So good job. Yes, they are high acid, but we have to make sure we add an acid too.
Mary Beth, we're getting a lot of feedback on the mics being open. I'm sorry, it's hard to hear you.
Let's use the chat. Let's go ahead and mute, and we'll switch.
Yeah. Everybody mute their microphones, please.
Yeah. And go ahead and take a
I'm not sure what that sound was. There you go.
All right, are we better? Is it better now?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
So, all right, so someone can tell me in the chat box, what is wrong with these jars? There's actually two things that are wrong. So type in the chat box. Capital blue. Do we have any answers?
Sorry, we have no 2-part lids, wrong lids. They don't look like Ball or Mason. Single piece lid, not canning safe. The wrong lids and jars.
Yes.
And they're not Ball or Kerr.
There's one more. So yes, you're right. Not 2-piece lids, not standard jars. There's one more piece, and I actually did not cover this, which I will right now. Yes.
The jars are too full.
You're right, right. There's no headspace, and they're packed. They're too packed. So very good.
That's some smart people.
Yep. Jams. Jams. Capital, all capital. Sorry, my son's trying to log in so we can get our action going. All right, next one. What's wrong with this one? Go ahead and write in the chat box. What's wrong with these? What was that?
Non-standard sizes, lids that's too full.
So we don't actually know with the jams and jellies whether or not the headspace is correct, particularly the two in the center. The reason for that is because jams and jellies tend to be a 1/4 inch, and often the lid will cover that. So we don't necessarily know as far as headspace goes, but yeah, standard jars, absolutely standard jars are not used. So good job. All right, what about this next picture? What do you guys see wrong with this picture?
Headspace is wrong.
So typically with tomatoes and vegetables, it tends to be an inch headspace. So you're right, headspace is wrong. There's a couple other, well, and yes, we've lost some liquid. We've clearly lost some liquid. And yes, the pickles, it looks like some kind of relish on the side. It's too much. There's too much in the jar. And that becomes part of the art, is getting enough in there without shrinkage, but at the same time, not getting too much in there as well. Good job. All right, what's wrong with this one? This one with all those blue ribbons gives me a heart attack.
I know the answer. It's unreal.
And we've had this at some of our presentations, and so Linda and I will be in there. I told you sometimes I feel like the canning police.
Look up closely.
Anybody know what's wrong?
They're stored wrong.
You got it.
Upside down. Yes.
We are never supposed to turn them upside down, and really we're not supposed to tilt them. And you'll see that in a little bit when we're done with canning today. So thank you guys. That's the best practices portion of our presentation. And Linda, you can go ahead and start your presentation while I get things prepped and ready to go for our live canning of our strawberries.
Okay. Are there any questions right quick before we get started? Can pureed pumpkin be frozen, or does it need to be in chunks and not frozen? I am pretty sure it can be frozen, Kathleen. I'm going to check on that because I was thinking the same thing when she said that. Often you can freeze things, like maybe it's grandmother's recipe for, spaghetti. You could cook it and freeze it because when you put it in a freezer at 0 degrees, it will stop that botulism from growing if your freezer's set at 0 degrees. But what all she said about canning is correct. Okay, great question. All right, let me go quickly. And Mary Beth, you tell me when you want me to stop.
Are you there?
I know you may be getting tired of looking at PowerPoints. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. She covered a lot of this already. We've just talked about tomatoes may need acidified. Also, figs may need to be acidified if you've ever preserved those, because their pH may be low even though they are high acid. Mary Beth is using the boiling water canner. She did talk about that. And basically you're boiling water, so it's reaching 212 degrees. And really quickly, the processing she talked about, where we're actually cooking the fruit, yes, will help take care of some of those microorganisms. But also when you're putting the ingredients in the jar, you're adding air to that particular product. And then you put the lid on. So you need to process them in that hot water bath to take those microorganisms out. So yes, processing is so important for safety. Mary Beth also mentioned how the jars are tested. This is quite a thermometer, kind of like might be used. This is actually from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, where our research is done. And with all that, they can actually tell the inside temperature of the food. So they're able to do research, determine the safety of that food and the processing that's needed. Also keep in mind the size jar is important too. If your recipe calls for a half a pint jar, then you need to stick to that in your preparation.
Linda, we are ready. And I'm so
Great.
glad that you actually had a picture of that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, let's stop sharing here.
Okay.
Oh, great. My little clicker's not working.
That happened to me too.
Okay, there you go.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, if you guys want to flip through your camera view and your gallery, you are going to see two videos of me. One is of the whole screen or the whole kitchen, and then the other one is my son, who is doing more of a close-up shot. So you can kind of switch back and forth so you can see what's going on. So definitely flip through those views. Sometimes in your upper right-hand corner, there's a view option, so you can flip there as well. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is wash my hands. And then, Zach, go ahead and show them all the ingredients that we're going to use today. Can you do a close-up on those?
Mm-hmm.
So you can see we've got strawberry and sugar. She has lemon juice. She has lemon peel. And sugar gel is the pectin that we have. She sent you this recipe, so I hope that you have, maybe you've even looked at it.
Yes, I did. And I'm going to turn my light on here. I didn't realize it was off. So, Linda, in just a little bit, as we get things going, is going to talk to you more about this pink gel. But that goes along with that no sugar added, because as you can see, that's a lot of sugar to be using when it comes to jams and jellies. So the very first thing that the recipe says to do is to take lemon rind. So my lemon rind, you want to get a close-up of that? I like to cut real thin, and I like to make it into small little chops. Some people like long, thin julienne style to do. I found that I can catch these in my jams, and I'll be like, oh, what is that? So sometimes I don't like to do it. Other people like this because they can see it better, and they want to pull it out of their jam, and they don't want to eat it, although it is definitely edible. So what is the difference between jams, jelly, and a marmalade? Well, I'm going to tell you in just a second. The very first thing we're going to have that we're going to begin to do is soften this rind. So we're going to pour it into our pot, and we're going to put in enough water just to cover it. And we're going to go ahead and get that up to a boil and boil it for 5 minutes. So the question was, what is the difference between a jam, a jelly, and a marmalade? And that answer is a jelly is pure juice. It's clear and there's no pieces of fruit. A jam has small pieces of fruit. A preserve has the whole piece of fruit in it. And a marmalade has some form of rind in it. So this is why it's called strawberry lemonade marmalade, because we add that lemon rind into it. We also add a little lemon juice as well. So Linda, we're going to go ahead and get started in boiling this. It takes about 10 minutes to do. So if you want to switch back to your PowerPoint, by all means, go right ahead.
All right, thank you. Okay, this is good old mold on this jam. Somebody just unmute and say, can I just scrape off the top and eat this? Yes or no?
No.
Oh, good answer. That's correct. Mary Beth covered this. We used to think you could do that, but USDA says just discard the whole container. So there again, that's why you want to process this and follow research-based recipes. We still see paraffin wax in the grocery stores. Hopefully that's for candles. Definitely not recommended for canning. Okay, and I'm kind of skimming over some things. Mary Beth just talked about the different types of jellied products. So I'm not really going to go into that. Jellies, preserve. conserves, I guess that's how you say that, it's like a jam.
I did not cover that.
Okay, it's like a jam, but it has usually citrus fruits, but also they may add other things like nuts, raisins, coconut. So it has a variety of ingredients, not necessarily fruit.
They want to see what's going on.
So the thickness varies among these products. The processing is still pretty much the same. And I think she pretty much covered that about the jams. And there's a lot of new flavors out there, like fresh preserving. Jams typically hold their shape and they're less firm than jelly. And they have the good old chopped fruit. And this is a great, if you're a beginner canner, this is a great, I think an easy thing to do is making the jams. In order to have a good gel to set, there's 4 basic things that have to be in balance. And that's the fruit, the pectin, the acid, and sugar. They have to all work together to make it gel, to make a good product. Obviously, there's different types of fruit. The fruit provides the color and the flavor. It also can supply a little bit of water to make sure all the necessary ingredients dissolve. Also, the fruit has a little bit of pectin. It may have all the pectin that's needed or some of the pectin. And pectin is really what works with the acid and the sugar to make it gel. Okay, that's kind of what pectin is. So underripe fruit has more pectin than fruit that is very ripe. Okay, so sometimes you may see a recipe say use some underripe and some ripe fruit, and that's because of the pectin. Okay, Mary Beth, you want to say something?
So we have our boil. Can you see it?
Okay, let me stop share. There we go.
Okay. So we have our boil. We have about 3 more minutes left. I don't know if you can see it or not. We have about 3 more minutes left, and then we're going to drain the rind and then put the rind back into the pot and start cooking up our strawberries. So
Okay.
you can continue.
Okay, thank you. I will say sometimes if you are using a commercially frozen fruit, which you can do that for some recipes like frozen strawberries, or if you're using unsweetened canned fruit or fruit juices, often the pectin's taken out of that commercially. So typically you have to add pectin. But there again, if you're using a research-based recipe, it should tell you that. Okay. So we kind of mentioned pectin, what it is. It forms the gel if there's the right combination of acid and sugar. It's when you buy pectin, let me stop sharing right quick. If you can look at me, do you see this product, Sure Gel? This is the pink that Mary Beth was talking about. And this is what's added to your ingredients, your fruit and your sugar and your acid. And this says for use in less or no sugar needed. So you have that kind of Sure Gel, and you also have a product. Can you see this one? This is a yellow container. It's regular pectin that you would use in your jam recipes. So there's also Miss Wages. That's the brand name for pectin. So you can find this in the canning aisles. Make sure you look at these products, check the date. They have a date on them. They're typically not recommended to use if, let's say, past the expiration date. Like these are good through December of this year, but after that, they may lose some of their ability to form that gel. So make sure it's still good, the date on your product. There's also a liquid pectin called Certo, C-E-R-T-O. It's just liquid in a pouch. And I've never used that, but I think there are recipes with that. I think I saw a peach recipe for jam one time using that. So, but you can find those in the grocery stores with the canning section. And those are what we call pectin. They're called commercial pectins. Okay.
Okay,
So,
Linda, I'm going to go ahead and.
Okay.
in there. Okay, one of the things that you have to be careful with is when you're cooking the rind, because you're cooking it at a high heat and a high boil, sometimes your water can evaporate. So I've just been making sure I've been stirring it the whole time, and it is ready to be drained. So I'm gonna go ahead and drain the liquid. Let me get this up here. Drain as much liquid as I can. Once your liquid is drained, you can pour your rind back in. And then we'll go ahead and add our strawberries. You can stay right up. So I went ahead and chopped our strawberries. I'm also turning down the heat a little bit. Get that stirring a little bit. And then we are going to add the lemon juice and the pectin slowly. So I have my canned, my store-bought lemon juice. And then I'm going to slowly add the pectin in. So I chopped my strawberries. Some people like to crush them. In fact, they tend to use a potato smasher. I'm originally from Florida, and I'm from the strawberry capital of the world in Plant City, Florida. And everybody down there says you have to crush your strawberries with a potato masher. However, I've done some experimenting, and oftentimes the crushed strawberries will have your strawberries float in your jam, so all your strawberries will be at the top. I've noticed that finely chopped strawberries tend to make it so they're more even throughout the entire product. So I like to chop my strawberries, but you can do however you want. If you want to crush them or if you want to chop them. So I'm going to continue to stir, and our film guy, Zach, will continue showing me stirring, and we're going to continue stirring until you cannot stir it down. So it will start boiling until you cannot stir it down. It usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes for that to happen. I'm going to let it sit just briefly. I'm going to give you another tour of the kitchen to see what's going on. As you can see, remember there are two televisions. You're showing our refrigerator covered. I've got 3 kids. We got a lot going on. Our refrigerator was covered. But we have a second camera up there so you can see both of what's going on. But let me go ahead and show you all the equipment that I have in place as we're getting this strawberries going. Number one is I have my pot where I'm actually cooking my hot products, because remember, this is a hot pack. And then I have my oven has my sterilized jars. I boiled them in the water bath canner for 10 minutes. Well, first I washed the jars, then I sterilized them, boiling them for 10 minutes. And then I placed them into my warm oven. And as you can see, I leave it at warm, which is actually 170 degrees. You have to keep your jars warm because you're putting a hot product into glass. So you don't want the glass to break. Next, I have my water bath canner, which you can use a stock pot for if you want, but you have to make sure there's some kind of piece. I like to use this. You usually, in normal times, you can buy this for about $10, this piece right here, to protect the jars from touching the bottom, because if you touch the bottom, you can't guarantee the proper heat. We want the water to be boiling all around the jars. So you can get this for about $10. I have even cans where you've taken a towel and submerged it to the bottom of the water, and it worked. So that's an option that you can use. But a big stock pot, or you can buy the whole water bath canner kit runs about $30. So I've got that water boiling. Come on over this way. Go ahead and show that on camera. Oh, see that?
Hang on. There we go.
Okay, so this is my lids warming, and I have my magic magnet here to help me with my lids. Those have been washed, not sterilized. We do not boil our lids, and they're ready to go. Of course, I have all of my ingredients here. I have my sterile zone ready to start filling my jars. And then you're gonna see me use all of these products. This is that magic wand that actually has this stair-stepping piece to it that actually shows a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. And you'll see me can tonight on and use that particular piece. But I also have my funnel, and this piece grabs the jars so that I can put them into the hot boiling water without burning. So that is my mise en place. Everything's got its place. Let's go ahead and see how the jam is going. It's definitely boiling, but I'm still stirring it down. The boil is still being stirred down. So it won't take long before it boils. I can't stir the boil down. Is that a good shot? Can they see it? Good, yeah.
While you're doing that, Mary Beth, I wanted to answer the pumpkin question. It talks about freezing pumpkin. It says cook until soft, remove the pulp, and mash. So yes, pureed pumpkin could be frozen if you wanted to do that. Okay.
You got a little while if you wanted to go back to the PowerPoint.
You want me to go back? Just holler at me, Mary Beth, okay?
Okay.
Get off of
Sure.
this real quick. Okay, just want to quickly cover, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Different types of fruit, they're basically formed into 3 different groups based on their ability to form a good gel. These fruits here are ones that typically have enough pectin in them and acid for it to gel. So typically only just add sugar. If they're overripe though, that may make a little difference too. The next group of fruits are ones that are naturally low in natural acid or pectin. So the recipes will probably call for adding acid or pectin. And the third group, where I feel like a lot of our canning comes, like the peaches and the strawberries and the blueberries, they're always going to need acid and they're always going to need pectin. So that type of group of fruit. So they are based in 3 different fruits. So to add or not to add pectin, it really just depends on the fruit. The benefits of it is that with the recipe with pectin typically gives you a greater yield. And also you don't have to test it. You typically get a good gelling product. So if you follow the directions carefully and correctly, the only disadvantage I think would be that maybe it masks the flavor of the fruit over time. But so it really depends on the fruit itself. So that's probably something you wouldn't want to just play with. So always check your research-based recipe. Recipes that typically do not require adding pectin, you usually have to cook it for like 20 to 40 minutes, the pulp. So it takes a little bit longer for you to actually make your jam. And if you do that, it says that you should test it for being done at 220 degrees Fahrenheit. This is for no added pectins. There'll be no sugar gel used with this type of jam. So also these type of recipes may call for you to use just regular ripe and then maybe some underripe to make sure that you get that gelling. Okay, so because with this type recipe, you're getting the natural pectin. Also, you may acid's important in jams and jellies. I think Mary Beth kind of hit on that. It's critical for the gel formation and flavor. And there again, it varies with the fruit. If there's too much acid in the particular fruit, then your jam's going to weep. It's going to be kind of liquidy. If there's not enough acid, the gel's not going to set. So it is important to use acid lemon juice, or you can buy citric acid in the grocery store. It'll say citric acid in making your jam or jelly. Let me go the correct way here would be nice, wouldn't it?
And I'm just going to speak up real quick. It's
Sure.
at a boil, but it's not at a full rolling boil that can't be stirred down. And you are supposed to cook it at a high heat. So I kind of mess between medium and medium high, and just watching it, because you definitely don't want burnt jam. I remember my mom used to telling me that whether it was burnt or not, you were still going to eat it back when she was growing up, because it takes a lot of work. So you want to kind of mess with it. You are supposed to cook it at a high heat, but you want to keep stirring it as long as it can't cook down. And actually, we are at that point. I am stirring it, but it is still continuing to boil. So I'm going to go ahead and add my sugar all at once. my son just commented on the amount of sugar that I just added. So now is a part that happens fairly quickly, in that once that sugar is melted, it's going to start to boil. And once it comes to a full rolling boil, you are to boil it for 1 minute. The problem that I have found is that it foams on us, and it will start to gradually rise in the pan, and you have to quickly stir it to make sure it doesn't overboil. So we definitely are using our muscles today in our stirring, but we're going to give it a little bit of time, and I'll cut in, Linda, when you're ready, when it's ready.
Okay. And one thing I've read that you could use to reduce the foaming is put like 1/4 of a teaspoon of butter in it. If foaming is a huge problem. But anyway, great. We'll come back to that. It already looks yummy to me. Okay, sugar. This is a good time to hit on this because it does help control the growth of microorganisms. So it is necessary for gelling. It helps with the taste. It also acts as a preservative. The type of sugar, we recommend just the white sugar, granular sugar, which is cane, or beet sugar is okay. That's the kind of type of sugar that you should use. It's recommended not to use brown sugar or raw sugar. They call it raw or semi-refined brown sugar. Their properties differ from white sugar, and the gelling may not be as good. The flavor may not be as good. Sweeteners such as brown sugar, molasses, sorghum can impart flavors that really overgo the taste of the fruit, outpower the fruit flavors. Honey or corn syrup can replace part of the sugar, but make sure that you have a tested recipe using that, because those two can affect the gelling of your jams and jellies. So it's best just to stick to the plain cane or beet sugar. So you don't ever want to just randomly change the type of sugar that you're using in a recipe, because that could increase the spoilage in the recipe, the jams or jelly, and it also could cause your jam or jelly to be real syrupy and liquidy. So there again, don't just guess on the type of sugar. We've talked about, Mary Beth hit reducing sugar. A lot of us want to do that. You can do that. As she mentioned, there are special pectins, and you can actually, the sugar gel, the box itself, open it up, and it has recipes inside that you can use in making your jams or jellies. So check your recipes. Also, you may want to use a fruit juice like she showed you, 100% juice. That was one that was on keep on the fresh preserving. If you're going to use artificial sweeteners, find a tested recipe with that. Some of those artificial sweeteners, such as Sweet and Low, that have saccharin, aspartame, like the Equal brand, it's been found that they can sometimes cause your jam or jelly to have a bitter taste to it with the added heat. And over time, the flavor may change a little bit. So I'm not saying that they don't exist, those recipes, but you may want to just test that with a small amount first if you're going to go using those artificial artificial sweeteners. I also read some recipes for jams and jellies will call for using just a gelatin, and I have a sample of that here. The Knox gelatin, non-flavored gelatins that you can buy. You can use that, but with those recipes, there's no processing. It's kind of like a refrigerator jam. You put it in the refrigerator and use it up within, I think it said, several weeks. So that's kind of a different thing, but it would have less sugar. It just uses the gelatin for the gelling, but it's not processed in a hot water bath. Okay. So there again, you don't want to guess, but there are alternatives for low sugar.
So we're
All
still
right, I'm
moving
kind of
along here, Linda.
Good. Okay, go for it.
We're just waiting at this point for it to get to a full rolling boil. And when it does, like I said, you have to do a rolling boil for 1 full minute. And when that happens, it's hard to actually keep it from rising. So you'll know when it's ready, when it starts to really give you a good boil. So it just takes some time.
Okay.
It's
And
nice and liquidy now.
one thing I wanted to mention, let's say Mary Beth wanted to make a lot of this for Christmas or something. It's recommended not to double the recipe. That could affect the gelling also. You could overcook it or undercook it. So it's best just to repeat the recipe from scratch and do it several times. Don't just try to double the amount, because that could affect your finished product. Okay.
You definitely have to continually, because you are cooking on a high heat, you need to continually stir. Every once in a while, I wait just to see if it's boiling a bit. But the bottom, you don't want to burn it. So, in fact, sometimes occasionally I feel it's starting to stick in one area or the other. Now, can we talk about stoves real quick,
Sure.
Linda?
I'm pretty much done, so yes, feel free to.
Okay, so you definitely want to use a coil stove. That's going to leave you the most accuracy in regards to being able to mesh with the temperature a little bit. As if anybody has noticed, I have been occasionally going to medium to high, just making sure we're not burning, but at the same time cooking at a good steady pace. So what about gas stoves? So gas stoves are okay for water bath canners because you do actually have a little bit of control over that fire, but occasionally there's not a constant heat, and it's not recommended for pressure canning. Some people do, they can still use it, but it's not necessarily recommended. The basic old time coil stoves are the best. Glass top stoves, on the other hand, are not recommended for canning at all, because there is a mechanism on those glass top stoves that turns the heat on and off. And so it doesn't provide a constant temperature. And so in that case, we have to be very, very careful in our pressure canning to keep a steady pace. And we can't always keep that. So glass top stoves are also very heavy and are very sensitive, and pressure canners tend to be a little bit too heavy for them. And so we want to reduce the use of that as well.
I will say that I have electric hot water bath canner because at home I have the glass top, but you can actually go to look on site at canners. I'm not sure which site I use, but anyway, you can find electric hot water bath canners. Just put that in, and they're pretty neat.
You can start to see that it's changed. It's not as thick as it used to be. It's very liquidy now, and it's already starting to foam at the top. So it's definitely changed its consistency. So we're just waiting for that full rolling boil.
Okay, another thing that I want to mention, she said how long once you prepare your jam and gel and you've put it in the jar and it's sealed, how long is it best quality? And it is recommended for a year. They mentioned in the research that I read, sometimes the reduced sugar jams and jellies may deteriorate in color and texture quicker than one that has the full preservative effects of the sugar. So that may be something to think about. Some fruits they darken quicker with the less sugar too. So flavor could occur over time. So there again, you may just want to do a test recipe of those. You know, some of us, we need to do that for our diet. Or maybe
So
we
if you can see a close up, it is boiling. It is at a rolling boil, but it is not at a rolling boil that I can still boil or stir it down. So I'm waiting any minute. It'll get to that boiling point where I have to start my timer for 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. It was the Ball site where I got that electric water can. So they're great to have. And if you have like a glass top, you can still do electric water bath canning. Just do water bath canning.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to have to eat my
Okay, it is, we are at the boiling point. I'm setting my timer now for 1 minute, and we're going to keep stirring a lot for 1 minute, and then we are done and ready to start canning.
Okay, it is now 8:25.
Well, it won't take long. I know, we do respect your time. And if you do have to go at 8:30, that's okay. You know, we will put the rest of this on. But that's what happens when we can live.
Oh, that's true. That's exactly.
And so it won't take but maybe 5 minutes for me to fill up the jars, and then the whole processing time is 10. So I predict about 8:40 we'll be completely done with this whole process.
Okay.
While we're waiting, does anybody have any questions in the chat box? You can see it boiling a lot.
Yes.
So that's good.
I do not see any. Oh, okay. So you do not sterilize the lids prior to using them?
Correct.
No,
So come on over here.
We're just putting those flats in some simmering water because we're trying to soften the red part around that flat lid so it'll adhere to the jar.
That's what I'm following.
But they do not have to be sterilized, so to speak, and the rings don't have to be sterilized at all.
And I'm using plastic or rubber on my glass so that not any metal products. This prevents any nicks or cracks. And I'm not going to take out all my jars at once. I'm only going to take out as many as I can work with. Come a little over here. And now we're ready. So if you can look at my product, can you do a close-up shot? There is a little bit of foam. You can take a spoon. Grab a spoon real quick. And if you don't want the foam, you can actually take that foam off just by skimming. It is a long process to do that, but it's also recommended to add a tablespoon of butter, and that often will take away the foaming as well. So go ahead and do a close-up shot down here. I'm now going to use my funnel. Now, I always put a couple of extra paper towels, and I always have some wet paper towels. And you're going to see the reason why. These jars are hot. And I don't know how many times I've done this, but I will still, probably on this recording, touch a jar forgetting that it's hot. So I always use a paper towel. You can use a towel or anything that's, as long as it's sterile. So I'm now using my ladle and my funnel to fill up my jar, and my headspace is 1/4 inch.
Okay, I just had a question about, I sterilize my jars by running on sanitized setting on dishwasher. Is that acceptable?
Unfortunately, we want to make sure we're boiling our jars in hot water for 10 minutes.
So you would need to do that additional boiling, Glenda. If it's 10 minutes or above, as far as processing, typically they say you don't have to do that extra water boiling sterilization. This one's right at 10 minutes. So you did boil your jars, right, Mary Beth?
Yes, I boiled my jars in
Yeah.
my water bath canner.
I
So,
think that would probably be the safest.
Real quick, I'm gonna talk about the procedure that I've just done. I went ahead and used my magic wand to remove any bubbles. I then checked my headspace down here. I checked my headspace, and then I put my ring on, and that jar is ready to go. And we'll start with the next one. Let me go through the whole process. I know some of you guys are just watching it, but here we go. I'm going to use my funnel. It's not a clean process, just FYI. There's nothing clean about canning except for sterilizing everything. I'm using my ladle. We may want to make sure we get to a 1/4 inch headspace. About there. I'm going to use my magic wand. I'm going to slide the outside and push in. Slide the outside and push in. Outside and push in. I like to do it about 4 times. I make it like a little cross. And then you're going to use the 1/4 inch. I know is this first step, and it is not enough. I need to put a little bit more in. Just a tad.
The reason she's using the magic wand is to get the air bubbles out.
Yeah, and I think this time I put too much in. Nope, we're perfect. So you see how the top right here is touching the top of the product? We're good to go. So now the next step, which is very important, and not, like I said, there's nothing clean about canning, is you need to make sure your jar around the edges and the top where your lid is going to lay is wiped clean with a wet paper towel. You could use a wet rag. But that ensures a good seal. And a lot of people forget that step. And now I'm going to use my little magnet. You could touch the edges of your lid. And I hold it there. I like to just put my finger in the center. When you put your ring on, you're going to just do fingertip tight. Remember, the purpose of the ring is just to hold the lid in place. All right? So I'll continue to do the next one. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And Linda, I know that you had some more things that you needed to say.
Okay. I've really covered a lot of it. One thing I did want to mention, even though you put them in the refrigerator once they're open, they can stay there. It recommends for at least a month. I know sometimes we stay a little bit longer, but you still want to check and make sure there's no yeast growing or anything. But typically, that's not a problem. It's recommended at least for a month. It's fine in the refrigerator. So after you've opened it. I really don't have a lot more to cover. I know in the National Center for Home Food Preservation, there is a page there for possible solutions to maybe problems that you may have.
I love that page. It's also So Easy to Preserve, and it's also in our cookbook for UT Extension.
So it did mention sometimes if jam kind of separates, and the gel is usually heavier, so it goes to the top and the fruit goes to the bottom. After it is sealed, it's set for 12 to 24 hours. It has sealed. You can actually turn the jar over for maybe 30 minutes to an hour, and that kind of helps get the fruit and the gel kind of back together, but then flip it back upright to store. You can just stir it up when you open that to serve. But make sure those jars will sit for 12 to 24 hours and make sure they have sealed. If they have not sealed, you can put them in the refrigerator and use them. Or if you wanted to just take that and put it in the freezer, you may want to put it in another container. You can use canning jars for the freezer, but sometimes with the freezing, it expands. So that may be a problem with your jam or jelly. So put it in another container and freeze it. But hopefully they'll all seal and you'll enjoy that for the year. This is great gifts that you can make. And as you share this with people, you You may want to say this is from a research-based recipe. Let them know that. Okay, the tool for getting the bubbles out, let's see. Do you need to do that for all hot packs? Great question. Yes, that is recommended to get the bubbles out because that makes a difference really in the processing. You're trying to get as much air out as possible of that particular canned product. So we're trying to get some of those bubbles out because if you have a lot of that, during the processing time, some of the liquid actually coming out of the jar if you have too much air in there. So that's a good practice for hot pack is to what we call debubble it with that wand. Great question. Yes, that's great for green beans and your vegetables for hot packing.
I have a program assistant in my office who would be having a heart attack right now with the mess I'm making, but when it does come to jams, it's not very clean. I also am doing a little bit faster, so I may be a little cleaner if I wasn't doing it so fast for y'all. But some tips. Always have a jar available. You want to point to the jar? Always have a jar available, and that's where I put my dirty funnel. I also use 1 to 2 wet rags to wipe my lids so that I can be clean throughout the whole process. I didn't check my. You're good. What if you put too much of the product in? Well, you can take a little spoon and scoop it out. I always like to keep a little spoon on hand. And we are just about done. I think I'm going to get maybe 1 more jar, possibly. We'll see.
One thing I want to encourage you to think about too, you know, when you're using particularly jams, it doesn't have to just go on a piece of bread. Think about the use of it. I mean, it can go on a piece of cake. It can go on a graham cracker, or you can use it different ways than just at breakfast. I think that's kind of fun to be creative.
Okay, so Linda, do you want to talk about what if we don't have enough for a full jar?
If you don't have enough for a full jar, you need to put that in the refrigerator. Go ahead and eat from that. You don't want to process one with a huge amount of air because remember we talked about the research. So you've got so much air that it's not going to work. The processing time is not going to be safe. So if you have a full jar, just enjoy it or freeze it.
All right, we are ready to take our products. I'll get rid of some of this.
Look how pretty that looks.
Yes, and we are ready to put them in our processor here. We've got definitely a rolling boil going. Now I like to keep it rolling boil constantly because it sometimes takes a while. That process takes a while. So occasionally you have to add more water. So I like to place them in uneven. So one on one side, one on the other. Otherwise it'll tip over.
And you want to have about 2 inches of water above the jars once she puts that down into the water. And you want to add hot water so to keep it boiling. So you may want to have some extra water in a pot somewhere just boiling in case you need it.
Linda, I already had one of my lids popped. Does that mean I still have to process it?
Yes, ma'am, you do. Because we still want to kill those microorganisms that are there. So.
Okay, this is the part that's tricky. You want to submerge very carefully down in the water. I'm gonna leave that up. We want to make sure, double check, can you get in there? Make sure none of them have fallen over. Make sure it goes back to a boiling water or rolling boil. And our processing time, I gotta double check, I can't remember.
I believe it's 10 minutes.
Yep, 10 minutes. Our processing time is 10 minutes. I'm gonna set my timer for 10 minutes. And then I'm gonna get some of this excess. Hold on, let me go.
That'd be good on ice cream later.
Yes. I have a little bit of extra here. Find here.
That little pop was, does that mean that it's completely sealed? That would not be a permanent seal. So yes, you still need to process it. Are there any other questions? I know we are past 8:30 here. Any other questions, comments?
I'm going to put all my leftovers into a small little jar, and I'm going to put it in my refrigerator because goodness knows we will consume this. And you're going to treat this jar as if you just opened up a jar. So people say, well, how long does that jar last? Well, it'll last about the same length as if you just opened up a jar. So I will still put a lid on it. And again, we just kind of opened it. And I'll stick that in the fridge. Treat it as freezer jam. So now come on over here and let's take a good look at it. It's a little foamy. Ooh, my dress is going. the air is going good, but it's got a little bit of foam. I would have really liked to see, want to do a real close-up shot. I would have really liked to have seen what it would have looked like. Looks so good. If it was, we put some butter in it to see if it would have been. My favorite part about this jam is the color. The color is just this gorgeous, and I'm looking at the camera right now, it does not do it justice. It's this beautiful light. I think it's the lemon that causes it to be this gorgeous pink. If you compare it to a regular strawberry jam, the strawberry jam is just so much darker. So we're gonna see what it tastes like.
And look how it coats the spoon. That's a good sign.
It really does, it does. So I'm gonna use a little biscuit right here. Don't you guys wish you could taste it right now?
Yes, we wish you were in your kitchen right now. This is like the Food Network. They just eat it in front of
you. It's not, I think the lemon, the part that I like about the lemon is that I think it cuts the sweetness down. It doesn't get you right here when you taste it. It's a beautiful sweet flavor, but it's not too sweet. I mean, you can't have a lot of it because it does have 6 cups of sugar in it, but I think that lemon just does it. It's my favorite jam. It's my absolute favorite jam. We've got 7 minutes left on the jam here. Does anybody have any questions?
I also want to mention that recipe said you could use lime, which that would be interesting. Okay,
you
maybe
really can't taste the lemon. You definitely can taste the strawberry. Definitely can taste that.
What about the evaluation? Mary Beth?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. So you want to go ahead and begin? The questions were fantastic. I see them now.
They were, yeah.
So go ahead and write in the chat box. How many of you feel confident? Just give a yes if you feel confident in cooking jams and jellies now. Or you can say no, however you feel.
Okay, we're getting several yeses. That's good, but please respond.
That's great. Cleaning up my kitchen a little while we're working. It's definitely a sticky mess.
Any other questions? Thank you for the
whole process is the same. Actually, with any canning, the piece that's important is, of course, the recipe and getting that tested recipe, but the measuring, correct head space, getting the air bubbles out, wiping the rim, and then adding the ring. That process right there is very important, and the same for anything that you can. Whether you submerge it in a water bath canner or a pressure canner is different. How long you leave it in the water bath canner for, those pieces are different. But the whole process that we showed you with, again, the getting the bubbles out, wiping the rim, making sure there's enough head space,
and putting the lid and the ring on is all the same. So we've got about 4 more minutes left. This is exciting. I can't wait to see it come out. Any questions you guys have or comments?
We had one person say it was very helpful just to see the live canning. This makes it more clear than just a written recipe. Thank you.
Good, good. And if you guys have any questions at all when you start canning, you can email Linda or I, and we'll be happy to answer it. And again, if we don't know the answer, we definitely have people who can find the answer for you.
We do have one question. What if you wind up with a batch of jelly that doesn't set up?
So you can, within 24 hours, reboil it. You can do that. It's a lot of work because you have to rewash and sterilize your jars. You can try that. Otherwise, if you have a whole batch and it doesn't set, then I just say treat it like a syrup. Put it over your pancakes. Be creative with it. Put it in a cake, like Linda was saying. It happens. Sometimes you end up with a bad batch of pectin. Sometimes we didn't cook it at a high enough heat. And that's why those parts in those books, So Easy to Preserve, and the Ball website and ours, that has the troubleshooting is really, really good. Because it can tell you reasons why it doesn't happen. And it happened to me. I went to Florida for spring break with all the strawberries, and we made a whole batch of this, and it did not set. And I think it's because I had the person take it off the oven too soon. That's my only explanation that I can think of.
Yeah, or just put it in the refrigerator. It mentions here you could overcook the fruit, use too much water, insufficient acid. Maybe you made too much at one time, or it could just be the fruit itself, the pectin. So incorrect portions of sugar. And so there's a couple of things it could be. Maybe you did move it too fast, it said, or you didn't let it sit long enough. Okay, what kinds of resources are available at your extension office?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. I don't, all kinds of things is what I want to say. We do, as Family Consumer Science, we do a lot of programs relating to the home, to family, to individuals. And we do nutrition, cooking, we do health programs, we do financial programs. There are publications that you can actually get online. Kathleen, I would suggest, I don't know if you're Sevier or Blount County, just email us and let us know what you're interested in, and we could find probably a resource to help you. But we also have an agricultural agent that works with things relating to gardening, vegetables, growing things, animals, insects, all types of things relating to agriculture. And we also have the 4-H office at our extension office, our youth program. So we are an extension of the university, and we offer a variety of resources to help individuals and families. Did you want to add anything to that, Mary Beth?
No, you did great. We have about 1 more minute left before our product is done. And Linda, do you want to check out the calendar real quick for our next 2 classes? Now, please be advised, this class was a little bit longer because it was a 2-part series where it had the best practices and the jams and jellies. It's always our longest class, even though it's our shortest amount of time for cooking the jams and jellies. So our pickling, we will only be discussing pickling, and our tomatoes and salsa, we will only be discussing tomatoes and salsa. Actually, we could do a quick vote right now. There is a sweet and sour pickle. Well, I call it a sweet and sour pickle, but Ball calls it a low sugar, a reduced sodium pickle, dill pickle. But when you taste it, there's sugar in it and it's sweet and sour. So I call it a sweet and sour pickle. It is the most fresh ingredients, and it is the most natural way of making pickles. It does taste delicious. The other option is to do a Mrs. Wages dill pickle. It is a pre-packaged that you buy at the store. We can do, it's just a regular dill pickle. So put in the box, do you want the dill pickle, the Mrs. Wages dill pickle, or do you want the sweet and sour pickle? Let's see what we can do for our next pickling class. And while you do that, and Linda, you go over dates? you guys can watch because it is done.
Okay. Our next class will be on May the 4th, and we had originally said we're going to do tomatoes, that class. May the 4th, it's the first Tuesday of the month. It looks like
So that's our
sweetness.
tomatoes. So tomatoes come first. Okay, another thing you can put in the chat box is, do you want crushed tomatoes? Here it comes. You can actually start listening for it to pop because it'll pop soon. These tend to pop real quick.
And notice she's going to lift those straight up and over. She's going to tilt those to get rid of that excess liquid. That's just going to evaporate from the lid because that.
So don't tilt. My husband always wants to tilt. Don't tilt. And notice I'm not putting it directly on the counter. You can put it on a towel. You can put it on a cooling rack. But whoops, do not put it directly on the counter.
Those are still actually processing. So you want to just leave them alone for 12 to 24 hours. Don't force
Look at it in the
them.
light. Can you guys see it in the light? I wish I could put it up to the light. It's such a pretty color.
It is pretty.
The camera doesn't do it justice. It does have a bit of foam in it, so I would definitely try the butter, the tablespoon of butter. But there you go. Want to do a close-up shot? There it is. There's our jam. I'm waiting for it to pop. This one already popped, and this one too. So did we put in the chat box whether we wanted crushed tomatoes or salsa? Crushed tomatoes or salsa?
Sweet and sour was the winner for the pickle.
All right, that's one of my favorites. We will definitely do that. I love making that. So sweet and sour pickle, and then what about salsa or crushed tomatoes?
So far, salsa's the winner. We have one crushed tomato.
Salsa is the one that you can have the most fun with in regards to experimenting. And we'll talk about that. So salsa's it. So that's our jams and jellies. You want to do one last look? I wish I could hand them to you and let you guys taste it from here. But that's it. Any questions?
I do not see any more in the chat box.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for coming. I do ask, strawberry season is coming up. I encourage you to go out, pick some strawberries, and make this jam. And hopefully at our next meeting in May, let us know, did you make it? Did you make the strawberry lemonade marmalade? Let us know how it came out. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Happy.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna stop recording. Oh, okay.